Mozart on the Run. In the US today, the median time spent by adults reading newspapers is 52 minutes per day. Be interesting to see what it is now. The same person who commits nearly an hour to newspapers also spends time reading magazines, books, signs, billboards, recipes, instructions, labels on food packaging, etc., etc. Surrounded by print, he ingests between 10,000 and 20,000 edited words per day of the several times that many to which he is exposed. The same person also probably spends an hour and a quarter per day listening to the radio. If he listens to news, commercials, commentary, or other such programs, he will during this period hear about 11,000 pre-processed words. He also spends several hours watching television, add another 10,000 words or so, plus a sequence of carefully arranged, highly purposive visuals. This is not to suggest that only words and pictures convey or evoke images. Music too sets the internal image machinery working, although the images produced may be completely non-verbal. Nothing indeed is quite so purposive as advertising, and today the average American adult is assaulted by a minimum of 560 advertising messages each day. Of the 560 to which he is exposed, however, he only notices around 76. In effect, he blocks out 484 advertising messages a day to preserve his attention for other matters. All this represents the press of engineered messages against his senses, and the pressure is rising. In an effort to transmit even richer image-producing messages at an even faster rate, communications people, artists, and others consciously work to make each instant of exposure to the mass media carry a heavier informational and emotional freight. Thus we see the widespread and increasing use of symbolism for compacting information. Today, advertising men, in a deliberate attempt to cram more messages into the individual's mind within a given moment of time, make increasing use of the symbolic techniques of the arts. Consider the tiger that is allegedly put in one's tank. I think that was an Esso advert. Here, a single word transmits to the audience a distinct visual image that has been associated since childhood with power, speed, and force. The pages of advertising trade magazines like Printers Inc. are filled with sophisticated technical articles about the use of verbal and visual symbolism to accelerate image flow. Indeed, today many artists might learn new image accelerating techniques from the advertising men. If the ad men who must pay for each split second of time on radio or TV, and who fight for the reader's fleeting attention in magazines and newspapers, are busy trying to communicate maximum imagery in minimum time, there is evidence too that at least some members of the public want to increase the rate at which they can receive messages and process images. This explains the phenomenal success of speed reading courses among college students, business executives, politicians, and others. One leading speed reading school claims it can increase almost anyone's input speed 3 times, and some readers report the ability to read literally tens of thousands of words per minute, a claim roundly disputed by many reading experts. Whether or not such speeds are possible, the clear fact is that the rate of communication is accelerating. Busy people wage a desperate battle each day to plough through as much information as possible. Speed reading presumably helps them do this. The impulse towards acceleration in communication is, however, by no means limited to advertising or to the printed word. A desire to maximise message content in minimum time explains, for example, the experiments conducted by psychologists at the American Institutes for Research who played taped lectures at faster than normal speeds and then tested the comprehension of listeners. Their purpose to discover whether students would learn more if lecturers talked faster. The same intent to accelerate information flow explains the recent obsession with split-screen and multi-screen movies. At the Montreal World's Fair, viewers in pavilions after pavilion were confronted not with a traditional movie screen on which ordered visual images appear in sequence, but with 2, 3, or 5 screens, each of them hurling messages at the viewer at the same time. On these, several stories play themselves out at the same time, demanding of the viewer the ability to accept many more messages simultaneously than any moviegoer in the past, or else to censor out or block certain messages to keep the rate of message input or image stimulation within reasonable limits. The author of an article in Life entitled "A Film Revolution to Blitz Man's Mind" accurately describes the experience in these words: having to look at 6 images at the same time, having to watch in 20 minutes the equivalent of a full-length movie, excites and crams the mind. Elsewhere, he suggests that another multi-screen film, by putting more into a moment, condenses time. Even in music, the same accelerative thrust is increasingly evident. A conference of composers and computer specialists held in San Francisco not long ago was informed that for several centuries music has been undergoing an increase in the amount of auditory information transmitted during a given interval of time. And there is evidence also that musicians today play the music of Mozart, Bach, and Haydn at a faster tempo than that at which the same music was performed at the time it was composed. We are getting Mozart on the run. The semi-literate Shakespeare. If our images of reality are changing more rapidly and the machinery of image transmission is being speeded up, a parallel change is altering the very codes we use. For language too is convulsing. According to lexicographer Stuart Berg Flexner, senior editor of the Random House Dictionary of the English Language, the words we use are changing faster today, and not merely on the slang level, but on every level. The rapidity with which words come and go is vastly accelerated. This seems to be true not only of English, but of French, Russian, and Japanese as well. Flexner illustrated this with the arresting suggestion that of the estimated 450,000 usable words in the English language today, only perhaps 250,000 would be comprehensible to William Shakespeare. Were Shakespeare suddenly to materialise in London or New York today, he would be able to understand, on average, only 5 out of every 9 words in our vocabulary. The bard would be semi-literate. This implies that if the language had the same number of words in Shakespeare's time as it does today, at least 200,000 words, perhaps several times that many, have dropped out and been replaced in the intervening 4 centuries. Moreover, Flexner conjectures that a full third of this turnover has occurred within the last 50 years alone. This, if correct, would mean that words are now dropping out of the language and being replaced at a rate of at least 3 times faster than during the base period 1564 to 1914. This high turnover rate reflects changes in things, processes, and qualities in the environment. Some new words come directly from the world of consumer products and technology. Thus, for example, words like fastback, wash and wear, or flash cube were all propelled into the language by advertising in recent years. Other words come from the headlines. Sit-in and swim-in are recent products of the civil rights movement. Teach-in, a product of the campaign against the Vietnam War. Be-in and love-in, products of the hippie subculture. The LSD cult has brought with it a profusion of new words: acid head, psychedelic, etc. At the level of slang, the turnover rate is so rapid that it has forced dictionary makers to change their criteria for word inclusion. In 1954, says Flexner, when I started work on the Dictionary of American Slang, I would not consider a word for inclusion unless I could find 3 uses of the word over a 5-year period. Today, such a criterion would be impossible. Language, like art, is increasingly becoming a fad proposition. The slang terms fab and gear, for example, didn't last a single year. They entered the teenage vocabulary in about 1966. By 1967, they were out. You cannot use a time criterion for slang anymore. One fact contributing to the rapid introduction and obsolescence of words is the incredible speed with which a new word can be injected into wide usage. In the late 1950s and early 60s, one could actually trace the way in which certain scholarly jargon words, such as rubric or subsumed, were picked up from academic journals, used in small circulation periodicals like the New York Review of Books or Commentary, then adopted by Esquire with its then circulation of 800,000 to a million, and finally diffused through the larger society by Time, Newsweek, and the larger mass magazines. Today, the process has been telescoped. The addition of mass magazines no longer pick up vocabulary from the intermediate intellectual publications alone. They too lift directly from the scholarly press in the hurry to be on top of things. When Susan Sontag disinterred the word camp, and used it as the basis of an essay in Partisan Review in the autumn of 1964, Time waited only a few weeks before devoting an article to the word and its rejuvenator. Within a matter of a few additional weeks, the term was cropping up in newspapers and other mass media. Today, the word has virtually dropped out of usage. Teeny bopper is another word that came and went with blinding speed. A more significant example of language turnover can be seen in the sudden shift of meaning associated with the ethnic term black. For years, dark-skinned Americans regarded the term as racist. Liberal whites dutifully taught their children to use the term Negro and to capitalise the N. Shortly after, Stokely Carmichael proclaimed the doctrine of black power in Greenwood, Mississippi in June 1966, however, black became a term of pride among both blacks and whites in the movement for racial justice. Caught off guard, liberal whites went through a period of confusion, uncertain as to whether to use Negro or black. Black was quickly legitimated when the mass media adopted the new meaning. Within a few months, black was in, Negro out. Even faster cases of diffusion are on record. The Beatles, says lexicographer Flexner, at the height of their fame, could make up any word they like, slip it into a record, and within a month it would be part of the language. At one time, perhaps, no more than 50 people in NASA used the word A-OK. But when an astronaut used it during a televised flight, the word became part of the language in a single day. The same has been true of other space terms too, like Sputnik or all systems go. As new words sweep in, old words vanish. A picture of a nude girl nowadays is no longer a pin-up or a cheesecake shot, but a playmate. HEP, H-E-P, has given way to hip, hipster, to hippie. Go-go rushed eagerly into the language at breakneck speed, but is already gone among those who are with it. The turnover of language would even appear to involve non-verbal forms of communication as well. We have slang gestures just as we have slang words. Thumbs up or down, thumb to nose, the shame on you gesture used by children, the hand moving across the neck to suggest a throat slitting. Professionals who watch the development of the gestural language suggest that it too may be changing more rapidly. Some gestures that were regarded as semi-obscene have become somewhat more acceptable as sexual values have changed. Others that were used only by a few have achieved wider usage. An example of diffusion, Flexner observes, is the wider use today of that gesture of contempt and defiance, the fist raised and screwed about. Don't know what that means. The invasion of Italian movies that hit the United States in the 50s and 60s probably contributed to this. Similarly, the upraised finger, the up yours gesture, appears to be gaining greater respectability and currency than it once had. At the same time, other gestures have virtually vanished or been endowed with radically changed meaning. The circle formed by the thumb and forefinger to suggest that all goes well appears to be fading out. Churchill's V for Victory sign is now used by protesters to signify something emphatically different: peace, not victory. There was a time when a man learned the language of his society and made use of it with little change throughout his lifetime. His relationship with each learned word or gesture was durable. Today, to an astonishing degree, it is not.